Blood pooled across polished hardwood floors. Shattered glass glittered like diamonds under harsh police lights. And at the center of it all, Clara Rivers, 32 years old, 8 months pregnant, lying motionless in what should have been the safest place on earth, her own living room. The 911 call came at 9:47 p.m. Something's wrong next door. I heard screaming, then silence. Please hurry. When officers arrived at the suburban home in Maplewood, they found more than a murder scene. They discovered the violent collapse of an elaborate deception. A life built on lies that ultimately turned fatal. Secrets don't just stay hidden. They grow. They evolve. They demand to be acknowledged. And when denied long enough, they can transform ordinary people into killers. Have you ever wondered what parts of themselves the people closest to you keep hidden? The colleague whose smile never reaches their eyes. The neighbor who receives strange visitors when their spouse is away. The friend whose stories don't quite add up. In this quiet community, Nathaniel Rivers was that person. To neighbors, he was a successful real estate agent with a beautiful wife and baby on the way. To Elliot Grayson, he was something entirely different. A forbidden love, a promised future, a reason to eliminate any obstacle standing in their way. What began as a chance meeting at an art gallery would evolve into a passionate affair, a desperate ultimatum, and finally, a brutal crime that left one woman dead and 2 men forever bound by the consequences of their choices. Before we continue this tragic story of love, betrayal, and murder, take a moment to subscribe to True Crime Village. Every week, we explore cases that remind us how quickly ordinary lives can descend into extraordinary tragedy. Hit that subscribe button and notification bell now, because the details of this case might just save your life one day. Maplewood existed as a postcard vision of American suburbia. Tree-lined streets, colonial homes with manicured lawns, and neighbors who still brought casseroles when someone fell ill. Property values stayed high, crime rates remained low, and residents slept with their windows open on summer nights. It was the kind of place where people moved to raise families, where generations put down roots and flourished. At 42, Oakwood Drive stood the Rivers home. A charming 2-story colonial with navy shutters and a wraparound porch where Nate and Clara hosted legendary summer barbecues. Their wedding photo sat prominently on the mantel. Clara in delicate lace, Nate in a tailored suit, both beaming with what everyone interpreted as unwavering love. They were that couple, recalled Diane Mitchell, Clara's fellow teacher at Maplewood Elementary, the ones who finished each other's sentences at dinner parties, who coordinated their Halloween costumes, who volunteered together at every community event. Clara Rivers built her reputation on dedication and warmth. Her 3rd-grade classroom featured reading nooks and positive affirmations. Students thrived under her guidance. Parents requested her by name. She organized book drives, mentored new teachers, and still found time to handwrite birthday cards to every child in her class. When Clara announced her pregnancy at the school's holiday party, colleagues celebrated with tearful hugs. After years of trying, the Rivers were finally expanding their family. Clara transformed their spare bedroom into a nursery, painted soft yellow with woodland creatures dancing across the walls. But Nathaniel Rivers carried weights invisible to outsiders. Raised in a conservative household where deviation from tradition meant exile, Nate had mastered the art of compartmentalization by age 12. He learned to suppress certain thoughts, to redirect particular desires, to construct a version of himself that would receive approval. Marriage to Clara hadn't eliminated these struggles. It had sealed them behind thicker walls. He loved her, certainly, but not in ways that consumed him. Not in ways that made his heart race and palms sweat. Not in ways that felt true to the self he barely acknowledged. At night, when Clara slept beside him, her hand resting protectively over her growing belly, Nate often lay awake, drowning in silent questions. Who would he be if he weren't afraid? What life might he have built without fear guiding his choices? The Rivers home contained more than furniture and family photos. It housed unspoken truths, avoided conversations, and desires carefully locked away. While neighbors envied their apparent happiness, tension vibrated through their foundation like a fault line, invisible until the moment everything collapsed. September 17th marked the grand opening of the Artemis Gallery in downtown Maplewood. Local artists displayed their work alongside visiting talents, drawing crowds of culture seekers and casual browsers alike. Nate Rivers attended alone that evening. Clara had developed pregnancy-related fatigue and opted to stay home. The gallery's stark white walls and polished concrete floors created a minimalist backdrop for the vibrant art. Nate wandered through the exhibits, champagne flute in hand, pausing occasionally to examine pieces that caught his attention. He wasn't searching for anything particular until he found himself standing before a massive oil painting titled, "Concealment." "It's about the parts of ourselves we hide," said a voice beside him. "The authentic self versus the performative one." Nate turned to find a man with intense dark eyes studying him rather than the artwork. Elliot Grayson stood with casual confidence. Black jeans, charcoal button-down with sleeves rolled to reveal tattooed forearms, and an observant gaze that seemed to strip away pretense. "The artist seems to understand that struggle intimately," Nate replied. Elliot's mouth curved into a half-smile. "He should. It's my work." Their conversation flowed with unexpected ease, from artistic techniques to philosophical debates about authenticity. They exchanged business cards professionally, Elliot mentioning interest in real estate for his studio, Nate expressing admiration for local artists. 3 days later, they met for coffee. A week after that, dinner. Always with plausible explanations. Always in neighboring towns where recognition seemed unlikely. Elliot's studio apartment became their sanctuary. A converted warehouse space with soaring ceilings, paint-splattered floors, and windows that bathed everything in golden light. Here, surrounded by half-finished canvases and the scent of oil paints, Nate experienced a freedom previously unknown. Their conversations ranged from childhood dreams to existential questions, their physical connection intense and immediate. "You're living a split existence," Elliot observed one evening as they lay together, the city lights glittering beyond the windows. "Part of you here with me, part with her." "It's complicated," Nate whispered. "No," Elliot countered, tracing Nate's jawline with his finger. "Society makes it complicated. Love itself is simple." Each meeting intensified their connection while increasing the weight of Nate's deception. He began constructing elaborate alibis, client meetings, networking events, professional development seminars. His phone contained a second messaging app, hidden behind a calculator icon. He showered at the gym before returning home. Have you ever wanted something so desperately it made you question everything you thought you knew about yourself? Have you found yourself drawn to a connection that threatened to dismantle your carefully constructed life? The heart rarely consults convenience before choosing its path. For Nate, the stakes rose daily. Each lie built upon previous deceptions. Each moment with Elliot made returning to his marital bed more difficult. Meanwhile, Clara decorated the nursery, scheduled birthing classes, and planned their future as parents, unaware that her husband imagined a completely different life. If you've ever experienced a forbidden attraction or known someone caught between two worlds, share your thoughts in the comments below. How far would you go for authentic love? What price would be too high? Your stories help build our true crime village community and remind us that extraordinary circumstances touch ordinary lives every day. By January, Clara's pregnancy had progressed to her 3rd trimester. Her body changed, her routines adjusted, but something else shifted too, her perception of her marriage. Small inconsistencies in Nate's behavior accumulated like snowflakes before an avalanche. He started taking his phone into the bathroom when he showered, Clara later confided to her sister. He'd never done that before, and sometimes his cologne smelled different when he came home late, like he'd applied a fresh layer before walking through the door. At her baby shower, surrounded by gifts and well-wishers, Clara watched Nate check his phone repeatedly, his smile never fully reaching his eyes. When her mother asked when they'd have their next child, Nate knocked over a glass of punch, creating a convenient distraction from the question. Meanwhile, in Elliot's studio, conversations shifted from art and philosophy to demands and accusations. What began as passionate romance evolved into something possessive, consuming. "You're mine," Elliot whispered during embraces, his grip tightening. We belong together. Only together. When Nate mentioned Clara's approaching due date, Elliot hurled a paint can against the wall. You promised you'd leave her after the holidays. It's February now. I need time, Nate pleaded. This isn't simple. Love is simple, Elliot countered, eyes flashing. Everything else is a choice. Nate's guilt manifested physically. Weight loss, insomnia, a persistent knot in his stomach. He tried compensating with extravagant gifts for Clara. A sapphire necklace, a weekend getaway, a custom-designed rocking chair for the nursery. Yet each gift felt like another brick in the wall of his deception. Clara preserved their emotional climate with maternal instinct, attributing Nate's distance to new father anxiety. Still, she began documenting discrepancies in a journal hidden beneath her lingerie. Missed appointments, unexplained absences, phone calls that ended abruptly when she entered rooms. I don't want to be suspicious, she wrote, but something doesn't feel right. Elliot's texts increased in frequency and urgency. Where are you? Who are you with? When will you tell her? His art darkened, canvases filled with fragmenting figures and obscured faces. He waited outside Nate's office, followed him to client meetings, drove past the Rivers home at night. Pay attention. When affection transforms into possession, when questions become demands, when someone monitors your movements, these aren't signs of devotion. They're warning flares signaling danger ahead. The collision of Nate's parallel lives became inevitable as Elliot's patience disintegrated and Clara's suspicions crystallized. 3 lives balanced on increasingly unstable ground, with gravity pulling them toward a devastating impact. Late March brought deceptive warmth to Maplewood, coaxing early blossoms from dormant trees. Nate chose Riverside Park for what he hoped would be a rational conversation. Public enough to prevent a scene, private enough for difficult truths. He arrived first, selecting a bench partially obscured by weeping willows, away from afternoon dog walkers and joggers. Elliot appeared 20 minutes late, disheveled and hollow-eyed. The vibrant artist who had once captivated a gallery crowd now moved with jittery urgency. His clothes wrinkled as if slept in, his normal grace replaced by unpredictable movements. I've been calling you for 3 days, Elliot said, remaining standing while Nate sat. You're avoiding me. I needed space to think, Nate replied, noting the unfamiliar wildness in Elliot's eyes. This situation has become complicated. Complicated. Elliot's laugh emerged sharp and brittle. That's the word you choose? You told me you loved me. You promised we'd be together. I know what I said, Nate whispered. But Clara is 8 months pregnant. I can't abandon her now. The conversation deteriorated rapidly. Elliot paced before the bench, voice rising with each exchange. When a family with young children walked nearby, Nate suggested they move deeper into the park, away from curious eyes. You're ashamed of me? Elliot accused, following Nate down a secluded path. You want to hide me away like your dirty secret while playing house with her. That's not fair. Fair. Elliot grabbed Nate's arm, fingers digging into flesh. Was it fair when you came to my studio night after night? When you told me I was your future? When you made me believe in us? Their argument escalated beyond previous boundaries. Elliot's accusations grew increasingly irrational, claiming Nate had deliberately pursued him to cause pain, suggesting Clara had somehow orchestrated their separation. When Nate attempted to leave, Elliot blocked his path. This isn't over until I say it's over. While this confrontation unfolded, Clara rearranged tiny onesies in freshly assembled dresser drawers. She hung a mobile of felt forest animals above the crib, tested the baby monitor's range, and added another parenting book to her nightstand stack. Her rounded belly made each movement deliberate, her thoughts focused entirely on the approaching birth. She found Nate's business card for the Artemis Gallery while sorting laundry, the edge worn soft, as if handled repeatedly. Curious, she called the number, learning about an artist named Elliot Grayson who'd held an exhibition the previous fall. Something in the gallery owner's voice when she mentioned Nate's name triggered Clara's instincts. She added another note to her hidden journal. In the park, Nate finally broke free of Elliot's grip. "This needs to end," he stated firmly. "I made a mistake. I'm sorry for hurting you, but my family comes first." Elliot's expression transformed. Rage collapsed into calculated stillness. "You'll regret this," he said, voice unervingly calm. "If I can't have you, nobody will." Nate dismissed the threat as emotional hyperbole, a dramatic flourish from an artistic temperament. That misinterpretation would prove fatal. Within 72 hours, the peaceful community of Maplewood would be forever changed. What followed would shatter 3 lives and leave an entire town questioning how well they knew their neighbors. Detective Liam Morales led the investigation, his team working methodically through the blood-splattered living room. They photographed the overturned furniture, the knife discarded near Clara's body, and the bloody footprints leading to where Elliot stood frozen in apparent shock. The scene told a clear story, Morales later testified. Signs of a chaotic struggle, defensive wounds on the victim's hands, and the suspect still present, covered in evidence. Forensic teams collected hair, fibers, fingerprints, and DNA samples. Clara's journal, discovered during the investigation, provided crucial context, documenting her growing suspicions and Nate's increasingly erratic behavior. Phone records revealed hundreds of texts between Nate and Elliot, many containing explicit romantic content alongside Elliot's escalating possessiveness. Maplewood residents gathered for candlelight vigils, their faces reflecting collective grief. Clara's students created a memorial of handwritten notes and stuffed animals outside her classroom. The school established a scholarship in her name for future teachers. "We thought we lived in a safe community," said Principal Helen Garner. "Now parents are having difficult conversations with their children about how someone so beloved could be taken so violently." Media coverage transformed a local tragedy into national conversation. Cable news vans lined residential streets. Headlines ranged from sympathetic, "teacher's life cut short," to sensationalist, "deadly gay love triangle." Talk shows invited experts to analyze the case from moral, legal, and psychological perspectives. At trial, the prosecution painted Elliot as a calculated killer who eliminated his perceived competition. The defense countered with a temporary insanity plea, presenting psychological evaluations diagnosing Elliot with borderline personality disorder and obsessive attachment patterns. Dr. Marcus Feldman, a forensic psychologist, explained to the jury, "Mr. Grayson exhibited classic signs of pathological jealousy, an obsessive fear of abandonment combined with distorted thinking about his relationship. When threatened with rejection, his tenuous grip on reality collapsed entirely." Despite compelling testimony about his mental state, the jury convicted Elliot of second-degree murder after deliberating for just 6 hours. The judge sentenced him to 25 years in prison, noting the crime's calculated nature and profound impact on the community. Nate Rivers never attended the trial. After identifying Clara's body and providing his initial statement, he disappeared from public view. He sold their home through a proxy, resigned from his position at the real estate firm, and ceased contact with former friends and colleagues. 5 years later, a former Maplewood resident spotted him working at a garden center in Arizona under a different name. His appearance altered, his past abandoned, his guilt a permanent companion. The tragedy that claimed Clara Rivers' life extends beyond individual choices to broader social forces that shaped each decision leading to that fatal night. In communities like Maplewood, conformity often masquerades as virtue, where deviating from established norms carries steep penalties. Dr. Eleanor Washington, professor of social psychology, explains, "When society rejects authentic expression of identity, individuals create compartmentalized lives. This division doesn't merely cause personal distress. It creates pressure systems that eventually rupture, sometimes violently." Nate's inability to acknowledge his sexuality openly didn't simply harm him. It created collateral damage affecting everyone in his orbit. Clara became an unwitting participant in a life built on compromise rather than truth. Elliot became fixated on a relationship that existed primarily in shadow. This case illuminates critical warning signs that transcend sexual orientation or relationship structure. Excessive secrecy and unexplained absences, rapid emotional intensity, and declarations of destiny, isolation from friends and family, monitoring behaviors, checking phones, questioning whereabouts, possessive language, you're mine, nobody else can have you, threats when facing rejection, dramatic mood fluctuations. These indicators appear across relationship types. Notes: domestic violence counselor James Chun. The fundamental issue isn't who you love, but whether that love respects boundaries and individual autonomy. Maplewood's healing process began with difficult conversations. The tragedy prompted community forums addressing mental health resources, LGBTQ+ acceptance, and relationship violence prevention. Local schools implemented curriculum on healthy relationships and emotional regulation. Religious leaders who previously avoided discussions of sexuality initiated dialogue about inclusion and support. Clara's death forced us to examine uncomfortable truths, said Reverend Margaret Wilson of Maplewood Community Church. We failed not just the individuals involved, but our responsibility to create spaces where authenticity is celebrated rather than feared. The most profound implications reach beyond this specific case to universal human needs: identity, belonging, and truth. Mental health professionals emphasize that psychological well-being requires alignment between internal reality and external expression. When these diverge significantly, both individual and community suffer. From this tragedy, several essential lessons emerge. First, authentic living isn't selfishness, it's necessity. Compromising core aspects of identity to meet others' expectations creates unsustainable pressure. Second, love without boundaries isn't love at all. Healthy attachment supports independence while unhealthy obsession demands possession. Third, community responsibility extends beyond judgment to creating environments where honesty thrives without penalty. Finally, warning signs in relationships shouldn't be dismissed as passion or devotion. They demand attention and intervention. The story of Nate, Clara, and Elliot reminds us that tragedy rarely arrives without warning. Their lives intersected in devastating ways, but perhaps their story can prevent similar outcomes for others. If this analysis prompted reflection about relationships in your life or community, share your thoughts in the comments below. What warning signs have you witnessed or experienced? How might we better support authentic living without judgment? Subscribe to True Crime Village now and join our community dedicated to learning from tragedy rather than simply observing it. Your insights might help someone recognize dangerous patterns before they escalate to violence. 3 years have passed since Clara Rivers' murder shocked Maplewood. The modest home where she died was eventually demolished, replaced by a community garden where neighbors gather to plant flowers each spring on her birthday. Her unborn child, a daughter who would have been named Emma, is commemorated by a small stone angel at the garden center. Elliot Grayson serves his sentence at Northeast Correctional Facility, where he participates in an art therapy program. His paintings, exploring themes of regret and consequence, have been exhibited in programs focused on rehabilitation through creative expression. His formal diagnosis of borderline personality disorder with narcissistic features provides context but not absolution for his actions. Nathaniel Rivers completed his legal name change in 2023. He works at a plant nursery in Arizona, living in a small apartment where neighbors describe him as quiet and private. Local reports indicate he occasionally visits Clara's parents, though these meetings remain brief and strained. He has never spoken publicly about the events that destroyed 3 lives. The case files in the Maplewood Police Department contain thousands of pages, evidence logs, witness statements, psychological assessments. Yet they cannot fully capture the human cost of secrets kept too long, of identity denied, of possessiveness mistaken for love. As we conclude the story, consider this question. What truths remain unspoken in your life? Not all secrets turn deadly, but few survive containment indefinitely. The courage to live authentically may prevent casualties we cannot foresee. Next week on True Crime Village, we explore how a dispute between neighbors over a property line escalated into a 10-year feud ending in arson and attempted murder. What transforms ordinary citizens into vigilantes seeking their own version of justice? Your engagement makes these stories more than just tragedies. They become opportunities for learning and prevention. Share this video with someone who needs to recognize warning signs in relationships. Leave a comment about how this case affected your perspective on hidden identities. And subscribe now to join our community dedicated to understanding the complex human factors behind true crime. Until next time, stay aware, stay compassionate, and remember that the most dangerous threats often hide in plain sight.